Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this Friday, the 20th of November, 2020. Thank you for tuning in. Now, let's get started. Let's open up the charts right here and take a look at what's going on. You know, the Fed, Steve Mnuchin is ending the Fed's emergency lending programs. You know, the repo market, these lending programs that kept the economy together, they're ending them. It says after the mainstream press accused the Trump administration of trying to sabotage the Biden administration by closing out a handful of Fed lending programs that were seeded with money from the Treasury earlier this year, Secretary Mnuchin appears on CNBC Friday morning for a lengthy phone call interview with Jim Cramer. The secretary defended the decision as a very simple thing and pointed out that the irony that Democrats had initially been skeptical of giving me $500 million to do with whatever I want. The program has been a great success story, he said. Now it's time for the money to come back as Congress intended. They're pulling down these programs, these emergency lending programs. It's been supporting the economy. And also, as far as new stimulus is concerned, where did I see it? See if I got it here, the article. Anyway, as far as stimulus is concerned, they're all going to go on vacation. You know? New stimulus, they're not even thinking about it right now. They're going to be thinking about their home in the Hamptons, you know, and swimming in their swimming pool or whatever, you know. No consideration to it whatsoever. Now, the markets have been front-running this big stimulus package that's coming. And now it's kind of like up in the air, you know. What exactly is going to happen? What's this article I have here? Mnuchin says he and the GOP leaders will discuss a plan to pass targeted stimulus with Democrats' help. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says that he will attempt to draft a targeted stimulus package with Democrats in the coming weeks. How can they? They're all going to be on vacation. They're going on vacation again. You know. Anyway, it says Mnuchin said he will, on Friday, meet with Senator Majority Leader McConnell and House Minority Leader McCarthy. We are going to come up with some sort of a plan to sit down with Pelosi and Schumer and try to get a targeted bill done. A bunch of BS, you know. And here's another thing right here. Targeted bill. What does he mean by that? You know what they mean by that? Right there. I'm picking right up on that. Targeted bill. Targeted, the word targeted. You know what that means? Cheap. A skinny package. And who are they going to target? The big boys on Wall Street are going to get the money, you know, and they're being cheap and everything because the stock markets went up, everything in the economy seems to have stabilized somewhat, and they're starting to get cheap again, you know. This is a game we're playing back and forth with this, back and forth, but this game right now is going to get serious because the markets could collapse between now and the end of the year. And what would that do for gold and silver and cryptos? Well, it's deflation. It's deflation. We could go through a very short period of deflation where the economy's ready for it. Let's face it. So many people have lost their jobs. So many more people are losing their jobs. The jobless report that's just come in, it's more than anticipated. The amount of jobs that have been starting to pick up again. The amount of jobs that people are losing, and every week, you know, we've had these massive jobs numbers coming in. Ever since this crisis began, it's been adding up. It's been what's the word they use for that when something is something adds up? It keeps adding up. Almost like a person that's gaining weight, you know. They gain 5 pounds this week, they gain 5 pounds next week, and 5 pounds a week after that, and then it keeps adding up until first thing you know, they're really enormously fat. Well, that's the way with this. This is accumulative. That's it. An accumulative effect. You know? of these jobless losses, of people being jobless. And what it's amounting to, it's amounting to millions and millions and millions and millions of people who've lost their jobs. Now, you know, some of these people are going to move in with their relatives, you know, or whatever, and they're going to find a way off of the street, but they're going to sponge off of their relatives, you know, and maybe a son will have to move back in with his parents into their basement. You know, none of this is any fun, you know, and they have to, otherwise what are they going to be, on the street? But ultimately, it's going to end up with the result of an awful massive influx of people coming on the street very soon, too, you know. This is turning into the Great Depression 2.0, but with more power than the Great Depression. Because the fall we've seen in GDP is bigger, with more impact than the Great Depression. And there's more people back in the Great Depression era. Let me just talk for a minute, you know. People back in the Depression era, America was dotted with farms all in the countryside everywhere. You know, the hobo, which is iconic to America, the hobo, you know, the man going along and he's all dirty and he's got a little bag over his shoulder on a stick, you know, a little bag with all of his possessions in it and everything. And he's riding the rails from the city. They went out into the country looking for work, because there was no jobs in the city, and they were starving in the Great Depression. And when they went out in the country, an awful lot of them, you know, they would go to a small farm or whatever, because America was dotted with small farms. And these small farms were back like they were in the 1800s. They had cows and horses and stuff, and they had everything that they need, all the tools and implements to survive. They were like survivalists now. I mean, they were like people who are off-grid. You know, they didn't even have electricity, but they able to produce food. More than what they needed for the farm, they'd sell the food, and these small farms dotted the countryside everywhere. And oftentimes these hobos would they'd come into a small farm like that, they'd knock on the door, and they'd say, "I'm starving." And the people inside the farmhouse would say, "Come on in, have a meal." And then he'd say, "Well, I'll work for food." And they'd say, "Well, you can sleep in the barn." And so, you know, remember the movie, The Wizard of Oz? Those three guys that worked on the farm? That's what they were. They were hobos that she had taken in and allowed them to sleep in the barn, and they worked on the farm for their food, you know? And this happened all across America, and it saved so many people. But what do we have now? We have these big conglomerates and everything else, and we've got 10 times more people. So if the system starts to really collapse like the Great Depression, you know, and you got all these people out of work, where are they going to go? There's no small farms out there anymore for them to go to, you know? And there's 10 times more people in the cities and stuff and in the urban centers, you know? And if this whole thing collapses, I mean, the job losses could be enormous, and people who haven't lost their jobs now, people that are working at home now, as the collapse intensifies, they could lose their jobs. Like me, I could lose my job on here, you know? And then what happens? And they're not thinking about this. They're just being tight. These politicians, like Steve Munchkin, they're being tight right now. They're thinking, okay, we got this under control. We got it under control until the collapse hits. Boom! Out of nowhere. But it's set up for that. Maybe they do know. Maybe they want to collapse. I don't know. But that's what it's set up for. It's set up for a collapse right now. And by them hauling their horns in, and they know exactly what they're doing. And this whole thing, a targeted stimulus package. He wants it targeted. Targeted to who? Who's it going to be targeted at? The big corporations, the Wall Street boys, and everything else? Anyway, let's get in there and look at the silver price. I'm going to tell you, it's starting to make me mad. This whole contrived thing, this whole year, it's all contrived, and it's all been put on us, and it's overburdening us. It's overburdening our brains, for crying out loud. I mean, you know, it's too much this year. They're just dumping on us. It's like we're in the middle of a storm, you know. You ever seen a storm that comes through, some sort of savage storm, and the wind's blowing, and then it starts to hail, and you got your car parked in the yard, and a tree branch falls on your car, and then all of a sudden the hail starts denting your car all up and everything. It's just too much. Lightning starts striking everywhere, and you start running for the basement. That's the situation. It's just like that right now. This year just keeps coming. Worse and worse, and we're not through it yet. We're not through it until the end of December. And between now and then, an awful lot of poop can go down. Between now and December. I'm telling you right now, guys. Silver price $24.23, but you know, if the market crashes and rolls over big, it's very possible it could take gold and silver down with it, because they start selling everything, and they start piling in the dollars. They'll sell their Bitcoin, they'll sell their gold, they'll sell their silver, they'll sell all their shares and everything, trying to cover market losses and stuff, you know? And the money that's in the system now can just go poof and vanish. Trillions can just vanish. That's the power of deflation. Okay, so we're looking at $24.23 with the silver price stable. It's up $20 cents today. Gold today, $18.71. It's up $5.20 today. It's right dead smack in the middle of its range right now. Cryptocurrencies, $525 billion. It's going up so fast, so I got to refresh the page. $522 billion. So it's topped off now and it's starting to recede a little bit, but it might heat back up again. $18,605 for Bitcoin. I'm surprised how good Litecoin's doing. Almost $84 right now. Which is, I mean, you know, what was it, just a few weeks ago or something? Not very long ago, they were like half that price. You know, so, you know, Litecoin is doing rather well right now. It's like, it's actually, well, Bitcoin is actually, you know, don't forget your Bitcoin, you know, when you think about these other coins. Just like with gold and silver, you should get your silver, you know, get your silver, real physical silver in your hand. You can't beat it. Anyway, look, Dow Jones Industrial Average today. We're looking at 159 points to the downside. But you know how far this thing could travel down? It's sitting at 29,322. We could get a crash that could take this thing down to 16,000 before the end of the year. Quite seriously, guys. We could. And it's that kind of crash that I'm worried about that could affect the gold, silver, and cryptocurrency price negatively. But they're playing with this. They're playing with fire. That's Steve Munchkin. He's playing with fire right now, I'm going to tell you. Coronavirus, what's this? No, this is what I want right here. Crude oil, $41.67. They're keeping it right around $40. A little bit over $40 right now. $41.67. Let's take a look at our MOVE index today. And the MOVE index is starting to creep up again a little bit. 43.53 today for the MOVE index. Now, you know, if this MOVE index goes over 100, they got problems. This is a very important index that we watch every day. But right now, it's still in the green, still clear. Okay, bonds and rates today. We're looking at the whole long end of the yield curve falling, and it's fairly substantial. 3.5 basis points on the 30-year. It's down to 1.54, and the U.S. 10-year is at 0.83. Here it says here. It says Munchkin's Fed move right now is like stripping the Titanic of its lifeboats, the Economist says. You know, and I have to agree. What are they trying to accomplish? I'm just shaking my head about it. Do they want to crash? Maybe they do. Okay. Because, you know, the Fed's what caused the crash in 1929. Maybe that was just a test run. You know? For the big one that they were planning later. I don't know. 92.39 U.S. dollar index. Dollar's going sideways, though. Even though it says it's going up here, it's you know, is pretty much going sideways. If you look at today, you know, it's been going sideways for a little while. Let's expand it out and take a look at 5 days. You know, looking at the 5-day chart, there's a slight downward trend to that dollar. It's trending down over, if you look at it over the 5 days. Let's take a look at it over a 1 month period. Yeah, and you can see the downward trend even more if you look at it over the 1 month period. Okay, what else have we got here to take a look at is we got our photo of the day, you know, and I'm going to tell you guys a little story. First, I'm going to enlarge this a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. It's an owl. He's inside a pine stump. Now, you know, when I was a kid, I think I was about maybe 12 years old or something, you know, and there's these lakes down in Florida that stay dry. Half of the year they go dry, and half of the year they're wet, you know. And because they're shallow lakes, you know, and they dry up like in the wintertime in Florida, you know, and then they fill up again in the summertime when there's a lot of rain. Generally they're about maybe 8 to 10 feet deep, you know, when they fill up. But during the wintertime, grass grows out in the lake, and there was these pine trees out in the lake, and I'll tell you how those pine trees got there. What happened was there was a few dry years, you know, and the pines grow fast. They're called sugar pine down in Florida, and they grow really fast. They'll grow 10 feet, 12 feet in 1 year. So there's maybe a few dry years where the lake never filled up with water, and these pine trees grew up on the lake, you know, and they might have got 20, 30 feet tall, and then you get a wet year, and it floods the lake, and it kills the pine trees. And so what happens, the pine trees sit there for a number of years, and they basically, a dead tree, the top falls off or whatever because it's a dead tree, and you got these dead trees sitting in the lake, you know, about maybe a dozen of them or more. And the woods all went punky and soft, you know, in them and everything, and the bark around them and everything. And I was knocking a couple of them over when I was a kid, you know, and kicking them or whatever, knocking them over because it's old punky dead pine trees. So I hit this one pine tree, and it didn't knock over, and the bark at the top of the tree, when I bumped it and hit it, it all split open, and inside there was an owl's nest. But the tree didn't fall over. It still stood, but the bark all come off of the nest, where I disturbed the nest, in other words. Didn't mean to. I didn't know there was an owl inside there. And I looked inside, you know, and there was this owl, there was all these owl babies. And so I went back up to the edge of the lake, you know, and the mother, she flew back, but you could tell she wasn't happy. So I went back home, told my father about it. He come and he took a look. And he said, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." He said, you've busted open this owl's nest. He said, "But you know what?" He said, "I can fix it." So my father marched straight back up to the house, and he grabbed some electrical wire, some wires that were laying around, you know, maybe the copper, you know, they have the copper in the center, and they got the coating on the outer edge. And he went back to that owl's nest, you know, and he took the old the bark that would been knocked off onto the ground, and he took that up, and he very careful, and he never disturbed the chicks or anything, but he put all that back in place again and wrapped the wire around it and everything, and tied the wire off with a pair of pliers so that it was all back together again the way it was before. And you know what? Then we left, and we watched it from a distance, and the owl, she flew back in, you know, and she took that nest back again, and just as if nothing had happened, you know, and she raised those owls. So the story ended good because, you know, he never touched the chicks or anything. You know, he was careful not to disturb the nest itself. He just repaired the wood around the nest that kept the nest protected, you know, with the wire and stuff and the bark. The bark was still there. And he did it so fast. It only took him about maybe 3 or 4 minutes to fix and repair that. So it all worked out good in the end, you know. Thank you guys for listening to the show. Like and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. And we'll catch you guys in the very next video. Bye-bye.